Today we'll be talking about building DApps from tools, testing to business plans, and we're really interested in this, trying to really move on the DeFi space, and then how can DeFi really be a stepping stone towards more inclusion and more financial products. But before going into the DeFi, there's one step that we actually all need is how do we get there, how do we develop, and how do we step in the space, noting that we want to change the paradigm a little bit. So when we talk about Cardano, we need to build on Cardano, right? So we need to understand and let our viewers globally understand how they can start their journey. So what are the frameworks and development standards, keys, and tools that we are needing today for building on Cardano? And how do they facilitate developer onboarding and collaboration? And how can we achieve that 1 million coders in building on Cardano? So I'll make a round, and then we'll see from there.
Yeah, so specifically from the context of DeFi on Cardano, one of the big problems is, well, there's a few problems that I see, but for now, let's focus on this issue of composability, which is widely talked about. So one of the reasons composability is so hard between different DeFi dApps on Cardano is that they all kind of have their own custom logic. And so say you want to do like a swap, and then you want to take the contents of that swap and then use it to lend on a certain protocol. That takes two transactions. You have to swap here and then do a lend here. But the real power of UTXO is this composability aspect where you can combine those logic, at least in theory, and execute a swap and a loan or whatever else in the same transaction. But because all these dApps have their own logic, it's kind of hard to do that. So one of the big things as far as standards go is creating these kind of universal DeFi standards that many different DeFi service providers can then all use and build dApps that are composable. And that really leverages the full power of Cardano, where you want to make the most out of every single transaction on the L1. So if we were to have these standards, we would be able to really maximize the use of each and every transaction, and that's what we've been working on.
Hi, I'm Andrew Westberg, and I think for me the way you get to 1 million users is by supporting many different languages and frameworks. So right now Cardano kind of has this reputation of being all about Haskell, and that's really not the case anymore. There's a whole lot of languages and frameworks that you can pick your own language that you want to build on. And there's the on-chain piece, and you can pick Haskell, you can pick Icon, which is more of a Rust-like language. You can also work in Python, but most of the code for a dApp is actually off-chain. And for that, it's really important to know that you don't have to pick, or you can pick whatever language that your team is good at. And that's really important for us to get to that millions and millions of developers.
And that's something we didn't know before, or we did know you as developers and people, but for the general audience, it has to be Haskell, it has to be Haskell. And I think now we're opening a new way, a new mentality, a new, not just frameworks and whatever, but a new fundamental things for them to start, that you can build on Java, you can build on different things, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different frameworks. I think I'll toss it over to Fabian to talk about one of his.
Thank you, Andrew. So my name is Fabian Bormann, and my team at Cardano Foundation focuses on the Java ecosystem. So Satya Ranjan built it, I think it's a whole organization meanwhile, called Blockspin. And they have a service called Yassi DevKit, which lets you spin up a whole DevNet, like in the Ethereum.
Yassi DevKit.
Yassi DevKit. It's like Ganache. If you know Ganache from the Ethereum ecosystem, it lets you really easily spin up a DevKit, run this local Cardano network in a pipeline, do testing in real time, top up wallets, so you don't need to require test data, things like that. So to fulfill that challenge, I think we need to enable people to easily build on Cardano, and it became really easy meanwhile to build on Cardano. If you're a TypeScript developer, then you can choose Mesh.js, things like that. So it's really easy. Just in a few lines of code, we wrote an ADA handle resolver, which is also powered by Yassi Store. which is a scoped indexer. So just 60 lines of code, and you only fetch ADA handle transactions from the blockchain.
60, that's
60 lines of Java code. So
yeah.
as you all know, Java comes with that boilerplate thingy, so 60 lines of Java code is pretty cool.
So one thing that I would want to tell a developer that is thinking about developing on Cardano, or even someone who's running a business and is thinking about building on Cardano, is that there are users here, and there are not that many products yet. And because of this composability that he mentioned earlier, you can come in and build products that have never been built before in other ecosystems, and actually have users that are excited that come to play. When you look at other ecosystems in our industry, there's so many different products out there that are doing the same thing over and over again, that when you come into the industry and you try to build a product, it's very hard for you to find those users and find that community to push your business and your product forward. And what I've noticed about Cardano, being here for the years that I have, my name is Peyton, by the way, I didn't introduce myself. I've noticed that there are thousands, if not millions of people here that are excited to try your product as soon as you launch it, if you're using some of the unique, technical offerings that Cardano has.
Yeah, I just want to maybe dive a little bit, one more step further. How can we make it an agnostic language? How can it become, in general, where everybody is accessible? Some of you mentioned some, but can we even dive more so that we can really facilitate this further to the developer?
Yeah, one of the things we do at, I work at Noom, and one of the things we do is we try to make all of our stuff open source. So there are some of those tools and products. We have one called Noom Chain, which is a chain indexer. Anybody building on Cardano can use that, just not us. And I think that's having an open source ecosystem and a facilitating sharing among developers across the ecosystem is something we can do.
Interesting. You like to add something?
Yeah, and it also kind of depends on what you mean by an agnostic language. So it's kind of like the holy grail of computer science. Like, how can we make a language that does everything or does the most as possible? And that's kind of maybe not necessarily feasible. So we have different languages that do certain things better. But as far as agnosticism goes, what you can do is have certain languages, use languages that use those languages to build higher abstractions or higher constructs that you can then use to do all sorts of stuff in a very developer-friendly, even a no-code manner sometimes. And we see a lot of kind of innovations along this front in the field. So, for example, Cardano's working on things like Marlowe. Other blockchain ecosystems have these like higher abstractions that make developing DeFi or even all sorts of smart contracts much, much simpler for developers. So I think it's less so about the language and more so these abstractions that you built on top.
That's something I would like to jump on. At the Cardano Foundation, we wrote this Cardano ballot application for the summit voting last year. And we directly identified that there could be a few things that would be reusable in other projects. So we started to put them out, make them somehow agnostic. And then, for example, this connect with the wallet button. It allows users to simply just connect the wallet to
you can use it anytime, anywhere, any place.
Yeah, exactly. And I heard so often, we had to build this again and again and again, and now we can use yours or the one from Mesh.js. That's pretty cool, but why is it in React, or why do we need React? So we started this year to make it also framework agnostic. You now can just use plain JavaScript, include that button, and then it works. And it also supports SIP45, which is the decentralized wallet and DApp connector.
Okay, thank you. I always receive this question, especially from the community, and then we really need to answer because we really need to help the community. This is very important. We're developing, we have problems. Usually we go to forums, to community, trying to solve those. But how can we get more insights? How can we maybe connect to Cardano? How can we, what are the solutions available so that we can get a better support? Especially now, if we're talking an enterprise, that's a different thing. So, enterprise need actual support. So for our viewers, for our enterprise viewers, for our normal users, for our normal developers, it's a different scale of support that is needed. How can we touch base on all of those from different perspectives? Maybe you can share experiences, and Fabian, maybe you can share insights from Cardano's perspective.
Okay, so this was one reason why we started to develop the Cardano Explorer, or we wanted to replace the old one. We also offer support for it, so it was not like there were not enough explorers outside. So, the reason was more that we wanted to focus especially on regulators and financial institutions and offer them also 24/7 support. So we have support in different regions of the world, and we're always accessible.
But how do they reach them?
They need a phone number or something that you can call. We have a form for it. So on the Explorer side, you have a contact field, and then they can get the support as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. You guys are hardcore developers from one side, from different sides, and how do you find support? Other than maybe the community, maybe somebody else. This is what I'd like to know more about this.
Yeah, so I'll say like the project I'm working on is called peer-to-peer DeFi protocols. So kind of what I was talking about, we have four, let's say MVP protocols for doing fully composable DeFi. So we have swaps, loans, and options, and an NFT marketplace, and these are all fully composable. But as you can imagine, you know, developing them with, as you mentioned, very kind of low support, it was tedious, let's say. But the good news, I think, is that while there's still a lot of work to be done on the low level for developers, you know, things like, you know, core smart contracts or these standards that I talked about earlier, once those are developed, and by the way, those will be developed by these kind of low-level hardcore developers that don't mind getting their hands dirty in the nitty-gritty. Once those are developed, we can expect a much easier developer experience for people who come on afterwards and start using these standards that make things easier. So to answer, I think it was hard for us, but once we kind of get over that hill, it's, you know, you reach that kind of activation energy, and eventually it becomes a lot easier for everyone who follows. So,
Yeah, for myself, I like to dive all the way down, so I go all the way back to like the scientific papers and try and understand it at the lowest level, and then I'll build tools and processes on top of that you know, like my team at Noom can use, and then other developers can use, and we can push that out as open source, or even put a gRPC interface on it so they can interface with it from any language. But I think just as far as where I go to get support, I either go to the papers themselves. There's good developer docs for Cardano. There's a good website you go to, I think developer.cardano.org is at the foundation's website. It's very good for a new developer coming in. I also do my own podcast on YouTube where I try to teach others the stuff that I'm just interested in or that I've learned myself. I try to share that knowledge. And that's kind of how I see, and most of the core Cardano developers, they're open. You can find them on Twitter, you can find them on Telegram, you can find them on Discord, and you can just reach out and ask them a question. And everybody in the Cardano community is very open to that, which is, I think, unique.
That's a supportive community.
It is.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, that's what I would also recommend is, you know, don't try to build in a silo. You know, the way that I've learned is by coming to conferences like this and, you know, talking to people like Andrew that's built tooling to push you forward, because when you build in a silo, you often start rebuilding a lot of the things that have already been done before. And, you know, there's conferences all over the world for Cardano, and there's also a huge community online, and many of us are very helpful. You know, at Atrium Lab, we're releasing, you know, an account NFT contract that we're going to open source, and that's going to allow anyone with any website to have an account system with datums, and you'll be able to just use that for free, you know, just by, you know, forking your own repo, adding some things if you want. And you can't know that there's tooling, that tooling is out there without coming to conferences like this, without reaching out online, without being in the community. So I would say before you start building, start learning and look at what existing products and, you know, tooling and, you know, people are already out there to help you.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing those tips, because I think those tips are as important as, you know, getting the experience. You know, we want the experience. This is very important. Now, I don't know if you can share with me some real examples of DApps that are currently being developed and used on Cardano that are related and focusing on real fi or real finance. coming from the world of DeFi, but supporting and working with the normal finance. How can we bridge more of this? How can we tap more of this? What are the current tools that people can also see and benefit from?
Yeah, the main project I work on is Project Noom. Noom is a fair music ecosystem on Cardano, and my team wants me to announce that we're going to be live on Mainnet at the beginning of December, and it'll be a private closed beta, and then we'll release publicly after that. But that is an open protocol that anybody can use. Any musician can release their music through that, and all the code is open source, so other teams can use that either as a reference or even use any of that stuff directly if they want to. So that's one example of a RealFi app on Cardano that's being built.
Anybody else can share some more use cases?
Yeah, I think a great example is World Mobile. I've talked to Mickey, the founder of World Mobile, multiple times, and what he's looking at is the common telecom industry and how the incentive structure is not right for people. Oftentimes there's a large part of the population all over the world, even in America, that doesn't even have access to internet or telecom services. And what you need to do is you need to incentivize people to actually set up that service. And instead of having this one person at the top that offers this infrastructure for people, you just incentivize everyday people to use their money to set up this infrastructure to be a part of the network. And I think that when we talk about RealFi and the impact that blockchain is going to have on the real world, it is that. It is changing the incentive structure from one person at the top to incentivizing millions of people all over the world to all contribute to something. And it all starts with the incentive structure at the bottom. If the incentive structure is set up right, it'll lead to better real value for people in the long term.
Very interesting, thank you. And talking about business perspective, and then this is something very important, that whatever we're doing in the end of the day has to be materialized in a business way and understand in a business way, and then trying to solve, not just business, but trying to solve a problem. So from the business perspective, what opportunities and challenges do you see in building and scaling dApps on Cardano blockchain? This is as one. And how can developers and entrepreneurs navigate those and create sustainable, profitable ventures based on those business part of things? We need business in the end of the day. We need financing at the end of the day. We cannot just create something out of the blue for nothing. So what's your take on this? I'll have all of you jump in.
So my first thought is data. Oftentimes projects right now are relying on centralized infrastructure to pull all of their data into their product. So, I was talking to Charles Hoskinson earlier, and he's, introducing Midnight as a partner chain. And I think what businesses need and what Cardano needs is another partner chain that is a data layer, that is a decentralized way of pulling in this data, because currently, we're relying on, a decentralized exchange that is offering centralized API for this data, and we can't have, a truly futuristic decentralized financial system when we're relying on centralized servers for all of that data. So, I think one way that Cardano would, tremendously benefit, and it would save a lot of developers, a lot of time, is if there was a data layer that we could easily tap into that, wasn't, hundreds of gigabytes that, would crash all of the time. And, developers knew how to use it, so.
So I just want to build on that. I completely agree that having a way to query data in a decentralized manner is super important, especially when it comes to building businesses. You kind of have this challenge of like, all right, I want to achieve scale for my DApp, but I also don't want to do it in a way that silos my DApp logic in a way that's like makes it hard to interoperate or compose with other dApps, right? So one of the things that we pioneered at our project, Peer-to-Peer DeFi, is this concept of beacon tokens, which is a way of using NFTs to tag UTXOs, addresses, transactions in a way that is easily queryable. And if we carefully marry the minting policy with the validator, we can actually have very expressive querying, but without even needing a separate DA layer. We can just do everything on the L1 by querying these beacon tokens with existing things like BlockFrost or DBSync or whatever query thing you want. So this goes back to the whole standards conversation. There needs to be much more agreed upon standards in the industry. And if we have that, we might not even need a DA layer. For something where there's like lots of data, you would. But if there's just certain things where you need like a list of UTXOs or whatever, that can actually be part of the contract logic and use things like NFTs that kind of follow UTXOs or transactions in a specific manner that lets you query them.
Yeah, I think for a business to succeed on the blockchain, it has to pick a problem that the blockchain is good at. Blockchain, we all tend to think of it as like this really cool Swiss Army knife type tool that does everything, but it's really not. It's a hammer, and so you have to pick a problem that is a nail. You can't pick a problem that's a screw. And one of those areas is that blockchain fits really well for is transparency. So if you have a problem that really needs transparency, like the music industry where everything is very opaque, then blockchain is a natural fit for it. And I think if you're looking to build a product on blockchain, first think about finding that problem that is a very good fit for the blockchain itself.
Great.
I think one crucial thing, you mentioned it all, is open source. Because if you think of a huge business, then blockchain would not be introduced by the management, typically. It comes from the developer. So developer needs to play around with blockchains, with frameworks. They need to build something that is a POC to then go to their managers and then, so old-fashioned Web 2 business, VW, where I come from. So you need to go to your manager, you need to show them, hey, look at this, it works, it's cool, let's introduce it to solve this problem. Because it's typically bottom-up, it's not coming from the top.
Anybody else want to add on the open source part?
Yeah, open source everything. I think companies a lot of times feel like, oh, if we open source it, then we're going to give up our proprietary information. But really, when it comes to a blockchain project, proprietary information doesn't really play into it. Like, your value as a company or a foundation is your community, and it's what everybody brings together. And so the actual code is not as important as the community you've built. So I think it's more important to share the actual code, help the whole community, and kind of raise all boats. And you can still have a company make a profit while being open source.
And what, when people think of the most secure code that has been released, it's often audited and open source because it gives people the ability to come in and find issues with that code or find errors. And, oftentimes people aren't malicious in this space. People will reach out to you and say, hey, I found a bug, fix this. And, you may send them some cash because, they helped you. But, open source and auditing at the same time is how you really, benefit the entire network, the developer community, and have better code ultimately.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about security and auditing. I don't know if anybody else also would like to pitch in on this. Any tips that they can follow so that they can get a better version, better coding, better certification of the code, noting today that there's always someone hiding, trying to inject something into a code, whereas in open source, you remove this hazard. So anybody would like to add to this?
Well, on Cardano, we kind of have this notion of like levels to auditing and certification. So obviously, the first level would be, something like an audit. But then the power of, one of the design choices of Cardano where we use, Haskell. If you want to get really crazy, you actually have this notion of formal verification. So if you want to get really crazy and provide the highest level of assurance, you can have like a very mathematical heavy proofs that your smart contracts do exactly as intended, and that's usually the most sensitive part of any DApp. And apart from other like industry standard ways of providing security like audits, that's pretty much just go down that path as well.
Yeah, I would see it more as security in layers. So you start with open sourcing it. That lets the community take a look at it. Next, maybe get some good security advisors for your project, somebody that's, has a lot of skill in that area. And then the layer below that, I would say, is paying for actual audits and then like Jerry said, the layer below that is the formal verification. So just start with the highest layer and work your way down. Whatever your DApp needs, not all DApps need all the way down. Some DApps just
don't
need
overcomplicate it.
Exactly. Some DApps are, they just don't need as much security because a hack would be not catastrophic or anything like that.
Last year, with the Cardano ballot development, we identified the lack of the mobile wallet support. So we thought of different solutions, and then we wanted to implement it, and then we came across it makes maybe more sense to turn it into a SIP, because we have a good way to make standards on our blockchain. And this was really surprising how engaging the community were with identifying if there is a possible way to add a man in the middle or something like this, and it was great experience overall.
I would just say that that's great advice. If you're new to this, new to Cardano, new to building on Cardano, look at the SIPs that have already been accepted and the ones that could be coming in the future, and look who they were proposed by. Look at the comments on them, because a lot of those standards, if you just ignore them and they do become the standard, then it's just going to be more work and more money and more cost for you in the future, and more stress.
That brings me to one SIP which we should touch base on, SIP 45, which is the peer-to-peer. I don't know, what's your take on this? How can the people, venture into this? What use cases, guys, you're using, and what tips you can give?
So with SIP 45, in a nutshell, you have a way to inject an API from one browser to another, leveraging the existing WebTorrent infrastructure. So you don't need to have a centralized signaling server or centralized API key. You can also bring your own signaling or WebTorrent tracker if you want. So it's like offering a download, but there is no download. It's just to exchange the deep IPs, and then you can talk directly via WebRTC data channel. But you don't need to implement all of this. We have a library. It's open source. It's Cardano Peer Connect. It has two parts. The first part is an interface for wallets. They can simply implement this interface and then add their SIP30 functions, because we inject SIP30 to the DApp from the wallet side. But you could also inject any other thing, like any other kind of API or Wallet Connect API, whatever you want. And if you have a DApp, you want to try out SIP45, please check out the Cardano Foundation Connect with Wallet button and just add it to your page, and then you automatically have SIP45 support without writing a single line of code.
Great. Jerry, you want to add something on the peer-to-peer side of things?
Yeah. I'll just say,
We have under 1 minute, so
I'll
we can
just
finalize.
quickly say that SIP45 is really cool because, when we talk about banking the unbanked and reaching people who may live in repressive areas where they don't have access to finances, or they have very restrictive internet access, something like a torrent-based query layer, or using it to get access to the data that you need is very important. It's not enough just to have a blockchain and the ability to sign transactions. You also need that data availability, which is what a peer-to-peer torrent tracking provides.
Very interesting. Thank you, guys. I think this was some interesting tips that was shared, some interesting knowledge, so that the community can benefit and then move forward and then get more people involved into the space of Cardano, so that they can reach that 1 million Cardano developer. And this is very important. With that, I'd like to thank everyone who attended. Thank you all. And let's have more people in this space. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.